middle of the night. When I come round to take your life, I know it will feel alright, 'cause you can bury me underground, paved over for good measure. I'm a revenant, baby, and I'll be back. He's a revenant. 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 Be sure to watch your six. I'm out with the boys tonight, and if we see your cheating face, well, you're in for a fight, my darling, 'cause you can try to drown me, babe, but I won't sleep with the fishes. I'm a revenant lady, and I'll be back. He's a revenant. 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 Watch out now! He's a revenant. I'm a revenant. He's a revenant. Let's go now! All right! He's a revenant. He's a revenant. Hands off! I'll be back. I'll be back. I'm a revenant. Yeah. I hear her alright while resting my eyes, like a sigh in the night, like a maggot in the pie. She's calling my name while I give it a try, like a thin veil of rain, like a sip of fine rye. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. She's calling my name under dusty black sky, like a beast to be tamed, like a stamp on my thigh. I hear her all night with my eyes wide open, like a whisper in the dark that makes my belly burn. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. City lights so far away, on a trip or a long holiday. Take a drive downtown without a care, 'cause you're high, I wanna be there. I wanna be there. City stars, pretty at night, sparkle softly, gems in the sky. I know you see them, I know you know that I love you wherever you go, wherever you go. City winds, blustery and cold, touches everything, makes it feel old. But you want me, always discreetly. You complete me, and I never wanna let you go.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for another exciting Daz Plus Pro Artist series. Today, it's all about posing your characters and how we can do that. And I hope you can see me. I hope you can hear me. I'm getting a good return. I'm not getting any dropouts. So let's, keep our fingers crossed that'll stay that way. Mr. Nate is here. The Julia is here. Mr. Bryant is here, aka Zero Calvin. Those are my moderators. Lola Lane, the Web Soul. Jeff is here. Swords for Two. So good to see you. And Patrick Dingo Williams, also good to see you. Night Trek. Keith Kubal is here, and I believe a couple of other people. You're not in the chat. That's totally cool. Sit back and enjoy and watch the ride, or if you feel like saying hello, you can totally do that. I've planned a few topics that we can go over because posing is a big topic. I'm hoping not to go over too much over 2 hours, but I may do a little bit today because there's just so much to talk about. And before we get to that, I wanted to make two quick pieces of news that I have for you. One, I don't know if you've heard about this already, but Daz and I have decided, well, my team and Daz have decided that we're going to curb the amount of content we're creating for the Daz channel. Not a lot, mind you, but it does affect the live stream. So currently, as Daz Plus subscribers, you get one live stream a month, and that we're not going to change, but we're pulling back on the amount of public streams we're doing. So we're still committed to doing them every so often, but not quite twice a month. So we used to do one public one and one for Daz Plus people, and we're pulling the public one for now. The Daz Plus one will remain. So, that is when, so you don't get to see me publicly on the Daz channel for now anymore. For a while until, we make different decisions. The second thing that we've decided is the amount of content that we've already produced for the Daz channel over the last 6 months. That was a lot of hard work. And I know many of you have appreciated it, and we're pulling back on that a little bit as well. So I'm making videos for the Daz channel right now, but they're not going to be like 2 to 3 a week anymore. It's going to be more like 1 a week. So we're making that decision. That's quite nice. And the reason for that is that basically we want to avoid burnout. I don't want to burn out. My team doesn't want to burn out. So it's one of those things. I hope that is okay with you, because that certainly works really well for me. So that is number one. Number two, a bit of industry news that has been announced at the GDC conference by Epic. Epic have found themselves with a lot of marketplaces over the years on their hands. They're, of course, the owner of Unreal Engine and the Unreal Marketplace. They're also the owners of Sketchfab, in case you didn't know this. Sketchfab also a marketplace for 3D assets. They also own ArtStation, the big portfolio website, but they also have a separate marketplace. And they also own the Quixel store, which also has assets that you can buy. And they've decided to roll all these 4 marketplaces into one big thing, and they're calling it Fab. So it's a bit like Sketchfab, but they're just dropping the sketch from Fab. And so fab.com is going to be coming later this year. And look at that, nice little animation that you can see here when you zoom in. So very nice. And this is going to affect the products that you've already bought. I think they'll still be available to download, but it'll all very much integrate with Unreal Engine. So watch out for that. It's currently in alpha, and they've been showing it off. I've been trying it out. It works incredibly well. And the way you're going to be able to buy assets is that in the preview of the asset, you're going to see how the asset looks. So you can switch to a wireframe view, and then you can see, hey, is this the kind of right resolution for my project? And you'll be able to drag it directly into Unreal Engine from there. So very exciting stuff. So a bit of industry news that I thought I'm going to let you know because this thing is coming. Righty then, that is that. Let's get to, in fact, posing. And Christina, welcome. Good to see you. Will Daz be integrated into Fab? That would be very cool, WebSoul. That would be very exciting. So what I've got planned for you today is I want to show you the many posing tools that we have available inside of Daz Studio. This is Josie. I've prepared a little scene with her. I can show you some bits and pieces with her just to look ahead of what we're doing. I'm going to talk about how you best manipulate your characters, the various ways you can do that, what to avoid, what to focus on, some of the helper tools that are not really all that well known, like the dials that can help you adjust hands and adjust other types of parts of your body, and some of the panes like the Puppeteer and the PowerPose pane that makes posing just so much more convenient than just grabbing a bone and dialing it into position. So in reality, we're going to use all these things in conjunction. And the other thing that I've had many questions about over the years was, how do you pose characters from reference? So we're going to talk about that as well, how to pose characters from a 2D reference as well as from a 3D reference. So one of those things. Yes, absolutely, Keith, absolutely. I totally appreciate that. And burnout is a thing. I totally appreciate that, and I get it as well. And if you do too much, there's only so much you can do, and there's only so many hours in the day. So yes, yeah, absolutely. Burnout is a thing. So let me just quickly talk you through where we're gonna, the amount of options that we have inside Daz Studio to pose our figure. So I usually have the scene tab open here, and I will go and just focus on my figure here. Figure starts from the hip. Thankfully, we've recently talked about how to rig an object from scratch, so that knowledge is very much going to come in handy. But the types of direct manipulation tools that we have in Daz Studio are essentially the direct manipulation, which means you can grab a part of your body like the hand, and then you can go and literally, with your universal manipulator selected, you can go and left click and drag the character around. And that's one way to pose characters. It isn't a great way. It might give you a rough shape of where the character needs to go. So like if we need to put her hands forward, but look, I've already made a terrible mistake here, and her left hand side here, my right, looks okay, but the other side really doesn't look good. So thankfully there's Control Z to undo that. If you use this system, be aware that you might destroy things that you didn't want to destroy, and it very much depends on how you look at your character. So if I do this from here, then I might get a very different result where the hand ends up than when I do it directly from the side. So if I do it from the side and drag the hand forward, I really only drag the hand into that direction, but also I didn't drag it forward as in over here. So for that I need to look from this direction, and then maybe make a little adjustment here. Doesn't always work. So left clicking and dragging, hit and miss results. I do recommend not to pose that way, but you can if you wanted to do that. I'm going to go back to the A pose here. A more accurate way is to click somewhere in the figure and pick a bone that you want to rotate. And this is usually done just with the rotation tools. Under parameter rotation, this is where these things live. Or you can also use this little guy. I'm going to talk about that later. But yeah, you basically select a part of your character, and if you don't grab the correct one by clicking on the character, I find it very, very helpful to look at the scene tab. So I have the scene tab open, and you can also select things from here. So like the left shoulder, the left upper arm. So shoulder was very difficult to select here. If I go and select this part up here, I might not actually get the shoulder until I go further over in here. So one of those things, scene tab is your friend, and then you can go and either use the rotational controls here, or you can use the parameters here. So it's always a nice idea to look at the colors in the viewport and see what color am I using. Like this one is the blue one here, so that would be the bend. If I left click and drag the bend, then that's the same color that does the same thing. So that's another option that you can use. There's also, while we're talking about these dials, there's also this little posing tool here in the scene tab, and that is something that might not be enabled by default. So that is over here in this little context menu in your viewport. If you click that, there's a thing called pose tool, show the pose tool. If you enable that, then that comes up, and that's a really helpful little guy that allows you slightly better rotational control. So if I go and if I stick with my arm example, I can go and hover over the blue circle here, left click and drag, but that might not always be as accurate as doing essentially the same thing with this circle here. So if you hover, left click and drag, you have slightly finer control. So if you have something that needs a really fine adjustment, the pose tool here, or the pose gadget in the viewport, is your friend. That's really nice. And you can also get to see what is front back doing. That's the green one here. Left click and drag, that is front back. And then the red one is the twist arm bone. It's easier to see when we do this. So those things, all of those in conjunction, this is what I mainly use to pose my bones. If you want to visualize the bones, we talked about this already in the rigging session. You can use the joint editor tool. That's this little icon up here. You can click that and then you can visualize the bones. And sometimes that's easy and nice to see where are these bones and what are they actually adjusting. So you can use this to select the bone and then make adjustments still with the pose tool here. That works, but it's nice for visualization. I tend to not have that enabled when I'm making bone adjustments. I tend to kind of switch to it every so often and then switch back, or most often I just use the scene tab that's open. So that's how I do it. Speaking of this pose tool, it also has, if I just look at a leg here, for example, right thigh, that's a good start. It also has this little trackball icon, and that combines the yaw, pitch, and roll into one thing together. So Daz Studio calls it bend, twist, and side. Other applications call it yaw, twist, yaw. Yaw, roll, and what was the other thing? I've already forgotten. But those are different descriptions for the same thing. So this trackball rotates bones in all these directions. So you can go and left click and drag the trackball and do it very, very carefully, and you'll see that all these things move the joint around. And it depends on how you look at pitch. That was the other one. Yaw, pitch, and roll. That's it. It depends where you look at your character from. So now up and down brings the leg up and down. Left and right kind of twists it. So the results here are very unpredictable, but if you practice it, you can, do it really slowly, and then sometimes get kind of cool poses on your character. That's what the trackball does. I tend to use it sparingly, but it is something that you can use if you want to. Just another thing to try out. So those are kind of what I call the direct manipulation tools, because they rely on you clicking somewhere in the character, moving a bone around, and then something happens. There are a couple of other tools that make this really, really easy. So one of them is my favorite PowerPose tool here. This is a whole pane that is up here, and you can get it like any other pane. It's installed by default with Genesis 9. I think with Genesis 8 and 3 you had to install separate templates for this to work, but in Genesis 9 that is just comes with the Genesis 9 Starter Essentials, and it's just a PowerPose tab that you can open with under tools, it's under Windows, panes, and then over here you find PowerPose. And this thing's really cool because it can do, you have to go and select the figure, of course. There we go. This thing's really cool because it has it's easy to visualize where the bones are. So all these little blue dots here, I'll just zoom in there quickly. Hope I don't forget to zoom out again. These little bones, these little dots, they represent the bones. If you hover, you see what the bone name is. If I click on this, then this part in the figure is selected. When I hover, it shows me it's spine 1, and spine 1 happens to be inside the scene tab also what spine 1 is. So it selects that particular node in the scene tab and on your character. And with that selected, you can now go left click and drag on that bone, and that makes it very predictable what happens to the bone, but it's in one place, so you don't have to go over into something else, like into a different tab or into numeric value or whatever. That's kind of nice. So at the bottom here, it shows you, depending on which little dot you've clicked, it shows you what happens when you move the mouse and where. So up and down is bending, but the right, so left clicking and dragging up and down means bending, but then right clicking and dragging up and down also means bending. But left clicking and going left right means twisting. So left click and go left right means this one bone, so not the whole figure, but this one bone gets twisted, which is nice. And then the other one here, the right click and side. Sorry, did I do this correctly? Yeah, so right click and then side, that goes and does that. So that kind of, rocks the figure. So that's left and right. But if I do the same thing, right click and then go up and down, it goes and bends that bone. there. So that's kind of nice. So you have full control over what the bones do, depending on which bone you select. So that was spine 1, this is then spine 2. It usually, when you do something like a bending over motion, like if I do, was it this here? Yes, there we go. You wouldn't do this on one bone. We'll speak more about this as we get to posing characters. You twist multiple bones, or you bend multiple bones. So like the spine is a really good example where you, if you want to have the figure kind of bend forward, you wouldn't just bend one bone. You would do it like what we do in real life. We use a multitude of things that are connected. So for example, my spine, it has more than 4 vertebrae, but hers only has 4. And if she would bend, she wouldn't just bend one, she would bend multiple in the same direction. And then Control Z undoes every single rotation here. But then, so those are kind of the blue bones here, the ones with the little star on the outside, this one here and that one, those are groups, and they drive a controller that we're going to have a look at on the parameters tab, and they adjust multiple bones in tandem, so together. So if you wanted to have something like a motion in which the character bends forward, then this is one of those groups that you can use. You have that for arms, you have that for legs, you have that for the head group here. But if we stick with the torso here, left click and drag up and down, then this basically happens what I've just shown you with multiple bone rotations. And twisting also works, so she can also twist left and right. And this happens with a controller. So if you were to look at multiple joints now, multiple joints are being driven by this action. And this also works for the head. So we have another one. And we're going to have a look at, so basically this is just a template. It works a little bit like Puppeteer. This is a template that drives sliders that are inside the figure. So I'll show you where to find those sliders so that you can drive those yourself, because not all of them are exposed in PowerPose. Let's have a look at this little guy here. This is the shoulders group. If we go and left click and drag that, then that brings the arms down, both of them together. And it's not just the shoulders. So it is the shoulder bone, this one here. It's also the upper arm bone here. So this is kind of the clavicle, and then this is the arm, and this is the upper arm, this is the lower arm. So yeah, this thing does both arms together. So you get a kind of relaxed standing pose really easy with just one click. And then this one here, that's the arm group. So left click and drag on that, and that moves the arm back and forth. But once again, not just the arm, it also applies some twisting motion there if you go left and right. Sorry, up and down actually. Left and right goes and bends the arm, the whole group, and then up and down twists the arm. So very cool. Once you get to know how to use these tools, it's a really nice way to go and dial in a pose. Like, you know, shaking somebody's hand, hello, how you doing? You can even go and do animations with that, relatively easy. Hands, exactly, WebSoul, absolutely. Let's talk about that. The PowerPose is so cool because it has these additional icons here. It's got the head here. Let me show you the head first, and then we'll talk about the hand. That's a good idea. So the head also has a group, and once again, the head consists of 2 neck bones and the head. This is just the head, but that might not be how we'd move the head in real life. We would also use a couple of other vertebrae here in our spine. So if we go and use the group instead, then she can move her head much further, and that's because these other 2 bones are also being used to rotate the head. And for certain things like the head itself and the hands, we have different groups. So if you click on this icon here, then you go and get switched to the hands here. And this is really cool because, and you're going to love this bit when we get to talk about it, WebSoul, there are some other things that are hidden in the figure. So sometimes we want to have this hand clasp something, like maybe a handle of a cup or something. And that is where these groups come in handy. So once again, little star, left click and drag. Oh, that's the wrong hand. Left click and drag, there we go. This now goes and turns her head into a fist. It kind of clasps the fingers here. So it's actually, it has a dual function. So left click and left right goes and spreads your fingers, as the description says, or puts them closer together. That's quite nice. But you can also use the left click and up down. That'll go and make the fingers grasp. It is a good start, but we have some other cool things that we can use in conjunction with that. We have this for the whole hand, but we also have this for individual fingers. So if you think the thumb is now a little bit too far in and you want it for the thumb to get out, this is the group. So sorry, this is the group for the thumb. That can come out. And you can do this for every finger as well. If you don't want to see this manipulator in the way, by the way, you can go and just change over to the selection tool here. That's just the node selection tool. Then everything will still work, but the manipulator is no longer in the way. And then if you don't think, hey, a group is appropriate, you can still utilize all the bones in the finger. Like if we stick with this, with her left finger here, it has 3 bones. This is the bone at the end, once again, for bending, as well as for twisting to a certain extent. Whoops, certain extent. And then this is the second bone, and then this is just the tip of the finger here. So quite nice what we can do there with all these things combined. And hands have that, toes have that as well. For that you have to go back into the figure here, and those are the toe groups here. I think they do have that as well. I've certainly seen the sliders in that. So that's PowerPose, and that is really cool if you have 1 or 2 characters in situ and you want them to interact with an object or with one another. Then PowerPose can really come in handy, because usually that's not where we have references. But for poses that you want to draw from reference, this is kind of less useful, because you really want to have full control over every single joint so that it looks exactly like in your reference. Absolutely, Jeff. Yes. The magic of this is, by the way, is a controller. There's a video, I think, on the Daz channel, certainly is on my channel, in which I'm showing how to set a controller up if you ever needed one for yourself. I think I've made one fairly recently for hair. So hair has this sometimes that they have multiple bones, like here we have multiple bones in the hair figure. We don't have PowerPose here, but we certainly have multiple bones in the hair. And sometimes you want to bend the hair into, you adjust like 5 or 6 different bones, and you think, hey, I wish I could set all that motion up to a single slider. And there's a video on the channel that shows you how to do that. Yeah, that's the magic of a controller. Controllers are very powerful, and this is all done with controllers, this magic. A somewhat related feature of the PowerPose tool is something called Puppeteer, and that is a blend space that allows us to blend multiple poses together. I'm going to show you this now just so that you know that it exists, but we're going to set this up later from scratch. So this is something that I have prepared earlier, in which I have essentially animated her head but also her eyes. So notice when we're back in the PowerPose tab and I move the head group, then the head does move left and right, but the eyes don't move with it. So that's not really what we would do in real life either. We wouldn't either just move the eyes or just the head and not the eyes. We would probably move both of these things in tandem. And with Puppeteer, you can set up these kinds of complex blended motions together. So I've gone ahead and done it here for the head and eyes, and it's almost works the same way. Once I'm in the preview mode, I can left click and drag, and then the head moves, but also the eyes move, and that looks more realistic now. It's difficult to see because, you know, if we just look at it from the side, you can see that the eyes also move, and I've set that up so that it happens both for left and right, but also for up and down. And I can now go and interpolate between these things and, you know, make her literally follow a fly or something. Imagine you add the hair movement to that. That's kind of cool. Puppeteer is very, very cool. It's as easy as having a pose, setting a dot on your blend space, picking another pose, setting another dot, going into preview mode, and then left clicking and dragging in that blend space. And Daz Studio interpolates all the values that are associated with that one dot. It's a bit like a two-dimensional timeline, if you will. So very cool. We're going to go and set kind of something like this up later from scratch. I've done the same for the legs, because in one PowerPose template you can have several layers. So this is the head and eyes layer, but this one would be the legs layer. So if I wanted her to to sit down, then you know I'm just having the legs straight on this, and then the legs kind of sitting down on this, and then you could put various other dots in place, whatever suits your scene, and then you can animate your character very easily. The professional animators, they have that both for the face as well as for the full figure. If they don't do motion capture, then this is how you drive a character. And if you set this up properly, then you can go and have one character in your scene and not actually go to loading poses and pose dials and whatever and posing every single character from scratch. You would set it up like this, and then you just go and know exactly where you need to move your dots to. The other cool thing is, no matter where your character is, this thing is still gonna behave the same way. So this is always gonna turn the character to the left, no matter how you look at them. So kind of cool. We'll look at how to set this up from scratch later. This is with Genesis 9, yes, absolutely. But this also worked with Genesis 8, so it is figure independent. Speaking of the hands, because this is another tool that we need to come familiar with. Let me go and use the other hand here. Yes, I'll use this hand here. Josie's left hand in the scene selected. Very cool. Actually, it doesn't matter if you have the hand selected or if you have the full figure selected. Let me just do this for the full figure. I'm going to select Josie here. And in my parameters tab, just in case you don't have it open, really important tab, I'm going to go and close everything down except for the pose controls here. You'll see all these sections, and they are partly, they're a mixture of controllers as well as morphs that you can do to particular parts of your character. And for the hands, you would just go and head over to the hands, and then you have the left one and the right one, so that's quite nice. This is going to be her left one, and here you can find some of the things that we've already looked at in the PowerPose tool. These are the sliders that are driven by that. Let me go and leave this open. Just quickly go to PowerPose and use this hand here, and go and left click and drag this. So we see this is it kind of switches to a bone now, but if I just go and do that with the fingers clasping here, let me go back to the top level of my finger. We should demonstration effect. It hasn't happened the way I thought it was. Sorry about that. Let me go and undo that. So some of these controllers in here, they can also drive the hand, and they're sometimes easier to use than the ones in PowerPose. So think of them as an extension for the PowerPose. So we've got fingers in, out. That's one. We have the fingers grasp. That's fingers without the thumb, by the way. There's also fingers fist. That's slightly different to grasp. So explore those in your own time, because it's fascinating to have a look at this. Just checking if we can see this from a slightly better angle here. This is grasp. This is fist. So they bend slightly differently. So kind of nice to see. This is like holding a coffee cup, and the other one is literally punching somebody in the face. Fingers in, out, that's like this here. Hand chop, that's nice as well. So if you wanted to make a chopping motion, there's tons of cool things in here. Hands flat. Oops. Oh, that's left hand fist. That's different than fingers fist, I suppose. Grasp, that's with the thumb. Left hand spread, once again, with and without the thumb. Index finger bend. So these are the controllers that we've looked at with PowerPose. Index finger, middle finger bend, and so forth. Thumb bend. Thumb grasp. So it's kind of cool. And this is a principle that it doesn't just apply to the hands, it applies to the whole body. So if we were to have a look at something like the torso group here, it also has interesting sliders here. So one of them we've already seen, which is like the hip bend. Whoop, that's that. But it does a little bit more than just the spine. So it does literally the hip as well as the spine. This brings us to another interesting point that we'll address a little bit more later. You see, it's not just the upper body that bends, she also moves her legs. And that's an interesting principle, because it means her center of gravity or center of balance is retained without her falling over. What's that waist bend? This is just the waist. We've seen that in the PowerPose tool already, but that doesn't take into account that maybe if we were to make this movement in real life, we would probably compensate for that by pushing our legs forward a little bit, or putting our back backwards a little bit, so that we don't fall over. So that's interesting. Waist side side as well. That's that. We would compensate. If we do this in real life, we take the hip and move the hip to the other side to compensate. There's things like here a body hunch. That's quite nice. If you think, I'm really deflated, I'm old or something, you can do that. It would take you quite a while to pose this, and it's really nice to see that we have so much variety inside the Genesis figure at no extra cost, or time overhead. That's quite nice. Flex shoulder upper body. That is, I think that's just a control morph here. Yeah, so very cool. It's good to dig into this and literally examine what the Genesis figure kind of has to offer. Feet is another thing. Feet left and right. So we have the foot roll. This is kind of nice. So that's a complex motion here. So it's not just the it's not just one motion. There's several rotation dials are being driven by that. Foot tip. Notice the toes, they stay flat, so that's quite nice. So make use of those helper dials when you try to post something, because like Jeff said, doing this would mean turn the foot, turn the metatarsal, then take a look at every single toe and turn this joint, but also the other two joints in the toes. And it's just so much easier knowing, hey, there is actually a funky little slider for these things. So kind of nice to know these things exist. And also the best thing that you can do is literally just go and have a look and play around with that and see what else you can find, and then memorize the ones that you like. So if you find yourself using this a lot, you can go and favorite this little heart icon here. That means it's now favorited. And then if you were to, this is saved with your scene, not with the figure. If you think, hey, I need to do this quite a lot to my feet, you can then go over to the favorites menu, and that's where all your favorites will appear in the parameters tab. So kind of cool. It is Matthew, indeed, yes, the WP Guru. That's my personal channel. That's also full of information, and we're gradually trying to bring all that information onto the Daz channel, which why I find it belongs. It's thank you for asking. I appreciate that. So have a look for these little dials. There are a lot of them in the figure, and the way to find them properly is usually not to go into the thing like the left foot. Even though, let's have a look if it is actually in there. Left foot, yes, it's also in there. So this is another interesting concept in Daz Studio. This is probably where the actual sliders are set up on the object, but all of those are mirrored in the top level of the figure. So if you select the top level of your figure, you get a lot more options, and these are usually set up as aliases there. So yeah, you should find them. If you're in doubt and you're thinking, hey, I'm not finding what I'm looking for, go to the top level of the figure. And also don't be afraid to try for the search option here. If you think, well, it's something to do with toes, but I really don't know what that might be called, whoops, then you can go and just search for toe, and everything with toe will be shown, and it even shows you where that is. So we have other toe options in the actor feet option, like proportion toe length. That is something else. That's not really a posing tool. That is something that you use to set up the basic properties of your character, I guess. Whereas the posing tools, they're meant to be applied to a character that when the character moves around. So like I wouldn't change my face from a goblin to a pretty lady. That would stay the same. That would be an actor property. But either of them could move their hand, and that would be a pose control. Nice, So we've talked about those tools, and there's one tool. Should I mention that? It is called the Active Pose tool. You may have heard of that every once in a while. I don't know if you have. There is a tool under Tools, Active Pose. That's the one, and that, although it exists, I never really could figure it out, I'm afraid. It's just know that it is there. I don't really know how to use it better than the other tools. I've tried many times, but it's not something that I comprehend. I gotta say, it's for pinning, right? Pinning, this is something that I personally don't use because I don't think it works very well. The idea, and you don't have to use the Active Pose tool for this. It works in any menu, basically. There's something else I wanted to show you. If you think, hey, my shoulder joint is positioned in a way that I'm thinking, hey, this is exactly how I want it. I really don't want to change it. You can see this tiny little icon here, and that is in fact a drop-down menu. If you click on that, you get the option to pin the translation or the rotation, or unpin either of them. And this means that you're telling Daz Studio, here, I want to lock this joint into position. So like the translation is left, right, up and down, forward, backwards. And then of course the rotation is what we've been mainly dealing with. And that is rotating a joint, like yaw, pitch and roll, or twist, bend and forward, backward. And so usually we don't really need the translation, even though that is important. If you have the upper part of the character bent forward, you might want to pin the translation because you don't want that joint to move with it forward. So that would be the translation. But the rotation, people use it often, and they then, so this is both of these things locked. They use it in conjunction with then dragging and dragging the figure. So now I can't actually do this to that arm anymore. I can't do this. I can still do the head because that is not, whoops, sorry, that's the hair, isn't it? I can still do the head and most other things about the figure, but everything that I've pinned is trying to remain in place. But of course, not the bone that is above it, which was probably the clavicle bone here, and that can still move if I yank the figure over. Also, it doesn't quite stay in place when it's when you make huge changes. So I don't tend to use it, but I know some people do rely on it. I find it easier to understand what happens in the whole bone rotation hierarchy, and then just make sure I do the right thing, essentially. So out of a lot of trial and error, I've worked out that pinning isn't really for me. And I think now I'm actually making that connection, live on air, that the Active Pose tool is something that on the tool settings tab exposes some of the pinning tools. This makes sense why I'm not that familiar with it. I just wanted to know it is there. So if you do fancy using it, do give it a go. Oh yeah, also if you do have any questions, then do drop them into the chat. If I don't see them live, my moderators are very kind. They're going to grab them and put them onto a little Discord channel, into which I'm going to have a look later, and I'm going to go and try to answer all your bits and pieces, all your questions. I'm just having a look at it now. Keith Kubal says, to clarify, you can use Puppeteer for the Gen 8 characters like G3 and G2. Yes, that is absolutely correct. Puppeteer is something that works not just with poses, but with everything. So you could use Puppeteer and blend two custom characters together. For example, I think there was an animation in which they've turned a regular human into something like a monster zombie, and that could also be done with Puppeteer if you want to do that. But yeah, so it uses poses as well as other things. So basically any parameter can be blended together. And as for PowerPose, that is something that was available literally since Genesis, I believe, Genesis 1. So they all have PowerPose. Genesis 9 was the last one to get it because it wasn't available at launch, but now it's available. And I think on Genesis 3 and or 8, you had to install just a second product that was, you get it for free, but it's not installed by default. It's just called PowerPose templates. I think that was for Genesis 3. So 8, I think, had it all built in. That was all I wanted to say about the posing tools. I think we can now do, and I'll totally leave it up to you, we can now go and look more into Puppeteer and how to handle something that I've set up here and set this up from scratch if you wanted to do that, and then take into consideration arms and legs and all that. Or we can go at looking at posing from reference. I'll leave it up to you. What would you like? I'm happy either way. I'm happy if I'm having coffee, you know, that's all good. Hanging out with a good crowd. That's really all I need. Have I got anything else that I wanted to show you here? No, I think that was it. Good stuff. From reference, yeah, let's do that. All right. WebSoul called it. Yeah, so poses, right. Actually, before we do that, let me just talk about the Genesis skeleton hierarchy a little bit, and let me go and bring in a brand new scene. That is actually something else I wanted to mention. And this is now that you mentioned, Jeff, posing can be quite confusing. So yeah, let's address that, because it has to do with how the Genesis skeleton is set up. Let me go and bring in the Genesis 9, just the gray character. And it doesn't really matter if we leave it androgynous or make them female. Let's say it's all male. Androgynous shape will work all right. Let's talk about the skeleton a little bit, because it's the naming convention has changed a little bit. And just to let you know where and how to even begin posing before we look at how to do this from reference. So I have a few additional items in my scene here, namely the environment options, the filament draw options, and the tone mapper. Let me just go and turn that into a group so that we don't have to, I'll call it text stuff, and then it's out of the way here. So if you open the top level of the Genesis figure, we now have more confusing things. Actually, let me just go and delete those as well. So this is here, we've got the eyebrows, the eyelashes, the eyes, and the mouth, and the tear duct. Let me just go take those away. This is equivalent to loading just the Genesis 9 dev load. I'm doing that just so that we get, you know, less confused in the scene. So we have Genesis 9 and we have the hip bone. And if you see what happens to the manipulator here on the Genesis 9 figure, the manipulator is at the bottom, and this is where we want it. But the hip bone is actually the first bone in our hierarchy. As such, moving the top level manipulator around will do the same thing as moving the hip bone around, and that might be weird to understand why that is, but since we've talked about rigging a couple of months ago, the reason for that is that the top level is basically just the node that says, hey, this is where we're setting up geometry with bones, and then this is the actual bone. So from it, we now go and see the pelvis and the spine. And so the implication of that is if you're posing the upper body, you're basically doing everything from the spine upwards. So if I select the spine and then left click and drag here, I can see that only my upper body moves. And then if I do the same for the pelvis, both of these are child bones from the hip. The pelvis will govern everything on the lower body. So left click and drag that and only my lower body moves. But that's not to say that you don't have to move the hip bone every once in a while. Like we're going to look at a standing pose in a moment in which the figure has basically the hips kind of rotated. And at that point, you probably have to also go and rotate the hip around so that the hip isn't straight anymore. And then you'd say, well, now she's still kind of standing on the ground. So you're going to have to tweak the hip back to here, but then maybe on the spine, maybe something else happens in which she's either going to the right and then open up the spine, then we have spine 2, and then we have spine 3, and then we have spine 4. Those are all the spine bones before the neck group begins. You would then go and say her spine makes a bit of an S curve. You would go and, yeah, that could go into this direction. Whoops. Into this direction, but then at spine 3 you could go and move that back up. I mean, I don't know if somebody would would actually do that. But you know, if you had a pose in which somebody contorts in this way, this is how you'd work. So you'd basically go and look at the hip of the person and then see where does that need to be. Is that plane out to the ground, or does that already need to be rotated? And then you take it from there. But the cool thing is now that we have rotated the hip bone, you still have the top level of your figure whose manipulator has not changed in regards to rotation and transformation, which is valuable. Yes, limits, Keith, good point. Yes, I'm going to talk about limits. It's actually a good transition into what I'll talk about now. If we go and bring the figure back into here. By the way, if you ever needed to reset a figure back into the A pose, in case you didn't know that, on the figure here with the figure selected, under Edit, Figure, Restore, there's Restore Figure. Control-Shift-F is the shortcut. I don't know if that's the default one or if I've made that here, but that will reset everything back to the A pose. Don't use 0 though, because 0 will set every value to 0 rather than every value to default. So under Restore, the whole every value that we've tweaked will be brought back to its default value, which is sometimes not 0, where 0 will actually set it to 0. So don't do that. Limits, yes, let's talk about limits as well. And the reason we need to address this is limits are set up on the character so that you don't dial poses in that would be impossible in real life. Sometimes you may have to go outside the limits, but if you come up against that, it usually means you're not doing it right. So let me see if I can find a good example. Yes, let me have a look at the head here. So head, just to go forward here, then the spine 4 goes into the neck 1, neck 2, and then we have the head. And then we have the upper head rig. But if I go and take the head, and I'll go back to my parameters tab into the rotational setting here, and we'll go and use left, like turning the head, like twisting the head as an example. You can go left click and drag this up to a point. And you're thinking, hey, my character needs to look into that direction more. And currently it looks like I can't do that. Then taking off the limits here would mean you could go into this little slider here, with this little gear icon. Every slider does that, both translation as well as rotation as well as morph dials. Go into this here, parameter settings, and then you can use limits, switch that off, or you can type in a different number. So if I switch it off, then I have complete free reign with my control here. Typing in a different value is often a better idea if I'm thinking, yeah, I don't really want the head to turn 360 degrees, that might come off. So maybe I'll just type in 50 here for max, and also for, I was going to say minimum. Let's do that. Or maybe I'll leave that to -22. But yeah, on the right hand side, we can now go all the way to 50. See that here, the slider has changed. So now I can do this and go, hey, that's good. So now my character can finally look further to the right. Or maybe I need to do this even more, actually. Let me go and do this to maximum 100, not to 1,000. Like, or 1,500, like Nate would say. There, brilliant. That's where I need the character to look. But now see all these little ugly artifacts that are creeping in, and there's a fold here, and so this is not what the geometry is designed to do. And if you needed to turn the head into that direction and you have a need to go outside the limits quite so much, it usually tells you, hey, if I'm coming up against the limit, that means I should go to the bone up from that and also adjust that, because this is not what my neck should look like. My doctor would be very upset if it did. So instead, what you probably want to do is, if I just set this manually to 22, which was the previous limit, I'm thinking, yeah, I need to really turn this head more. Then what you probably want to do is look at where that is in the scene tab, go one down from there, or up in this case, down from there to the neck, and also move that. And then that's still not enough. So you go back to the next bone in the hierarchy up, essentially. Well, up in the hierarchy, down for us physically, and then also go and do this. So now we have more or less the same head movement, but without having to go outside any of the limits. Same with things even further up. So if you think, hey, my character would really look even further into that direction, you think, yeah, but if you were to do this in real life, you wouldn't just do this. You would also use your upper body and also move over here. And this is what we need to do on the Genesis figure as well. So from the neck, you would go further down like the spine, and actually real people, they would actually go and use the spinal movement, and if they wanted to look behind them, this is the kind of movement we would really make. And this kind of comes from understanding what you would do in real life, and also just seeing it as a bit of a warning sign. If you do have limits and you come up against them and you frequently do that, just think to yourself, I think I'm not doing it quite properly. Just go and follow the bone hierarchy into the other direction. The Camilla is here. The X201 is here. How exciting. How's it going? Good to see you. If you ever needed to visualize the bones, I said this before, just as a quick reminder here, you can go and use your joint editor tool and then just see what bones are available. And that just gives you an indication of seeing, hey, are there any bones that I should be moving instead? So yeah, quite exciting, quite cool. But if you ever needed to do that, and sometimes this question also comes up when you apply a pose that was created with the limits off, usually you get a little message that says, hey, the pose that is trying to be applied here is outside the limits. Would you like to disable the limits? And in that case, you can either say yes or no. If you say no, the limits on the figure will remain in place, and the pose will be applied as far as possible, but it might not be exactly as the creator had intended. Or if you say yes, disable the limits, then it'll be exactly like the creator had intended. Love the 1500% thing. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Keith, let me know if this answers it. So there is usually, if you want to enable or disable one lock, I would go and do this on these little dials here, on the little gear icon, parameter settings, and then you say you can use this, or you can also use this here. Oh, sorry, no, that's something else. That's just like lock this value into position. That's not it. Yeah, so that's how I would do it. I hope that was, you're welcome. I hope that made sense. Let me go and bring him back into the A pose. So that was with figure, restore figure pose. So this now leads us into how would you pose a character from a reference? Is that a good idea? Oh, hang on a second. Is there a way to glue the feet to the ground as we're posing? Do you know 3D Universe has a tool like that makes that happen in animations. So for animations, you often have this foot sliding problem, and I think he has something called stick to floor. I think might be. But other than that, no, I don't know of a different way to marry up the feet with a position on the floor. I mean, you could use an arcade chain, but so I think it might also be the way you pose the figures. It could be, so I tend to pose the figures literally in this order, from the hip going forward. I'd use the lower body first, or the upper body, depends on what needs more work. So one part first, like in our case, it would be like the lower body, pelvis, then use the thigh. I might just switch this over to the joint editor here. So then I'd pose this, pose the left and right version of that. Then I'd go and pose the shin here. Then I'd go and pose the feet and the metatarsal and the toes. That's how I would do it. And once I'm done there, then I'd go to the upper body and then pose that. Unless there's something that where I'm using a pose that gets me halfway there, like say a sitting pose, but the hands are not in the right position, then I just usually leave the bottom as it is and just use the hands to do whatever needs to be done on the table. Yeah, this is how I would do it. So in that respect, I don't have a need to glue the feet to the floor. But let me know more about your circumstances. So maybe, that makes more sense then. It could be. That might be an option there, X201. Yeah, so we talked about pinning. There's something else I didn't quite, I just kind of glossed over there. But if we were to see if I can try it on the feet, you can do something in that you lock a value. So if we just take the foot here, for example, and you think, yeah, I can go and lock this value into place, like lock, then this can't be changed anymore. So no matter which tool you use to do this, it's a little bit like pinning, but more it just locks this slider into position. So the other two can still be moved, but the X rotation can't. And it's a bit like also locking camera controls. If ever you needed to do that, you can lock multiple at a time. If you're thinking, hey, I'm happy with my foot's rotation in total, you can left click and drag all over these so that it's not that visible, but if you left click and drag, they all light up. And now I'm letting go of the left click, and then you right click and you say lock selected properties, and they all get locked. So that is also possible. You can go further by saying, hey, I want all my transforms to be locked that way. So not just the rotations. We don't have anything else, but if you had something more than just the rotation, you can go and grab all these values, like scale would be a possibility here. And then you can go and lock all of those. That's something you can try, or unlock the same way. Ding, now everything is usable again. Yeah, that is something you can try. Limp stick, that's the one, exactly. And there's another one for Genesis 9. You found it, perfect. Yes, Keith, that is possible. That is possible. In fact, let me just quickly show you how to do that. Let's do Puppeteer now, and then we'll do posing from reference after that. How's that? And then that's probably going to take a long time, because posing to get it right, it just takes a long time. So I'll look at this twice. But yeah, in the Puppeteer example, let's go ahead and do that. So Puppeteer, I had this example of Josie in which she looked left and right. I suppose we now need the eyes again, huh? Because we need the eyes of the character. So let me just go load that figure in again. Doesn't have to be anything classy, but the gray Genesis figure works just fine. Oh, there's one other thing before we start here. The Genesis figure comes on, of course, in high resolution. And for posing, it might be faster if you don't have hair in the when you make the original pose, hair or clothing. And it might even be faster if you go to parameters, mesh resolution, and set your character from high to base resolution, because then your computer can, push things around a little bit quicker. This is really useful in animations if you have lots of poses basically being moved all the time. Yeah, so Puppeteer, let's have a look at that. So with your top figure selected in Puppeteer, this is in edit mode by default, and you just have something called layer 1. And if we wanted to build something in which the character goes maybe from this position into the sitting position, then I would always recommend we click with edit mode enabled just somewhere in this viewport. So that locks this pose in. This is essentially recording this pose to there. And any adjustments we now make would, in the preview mode, go and derive from that. So we can go and click this again to go back to this pose, or we can go left click and drag anywhere in the Puppeteer tab to blend between where we are and where we're going. So you can go into all types of directions. You can even set this pose multiple times. It's like it's a very abstract way of dragging things around here. So let me go back to edit mode and now do it so that the feet stay on the ground, but the character kind of sits down. Let's do that. So first of all, I'm going to bring my draw avatars back so that I see my I see this. I might even go and bring in a cube so that my guy can sit on it. I might even have a chair somewhere. Let's see. We can sit him on a chair. Do I have a chair? In all files, maybe? Chair. Chair, perfect. Chair it is, perfect. This is great. Whoops. Chair will be here. And we're going to sit our figure into that chair. Now notice up here, this changes depending which object or which part of your object is selected. So now my dot seems to be gone, but that's because I have my chair selected, and you can see that in the scene tab as well. And the moment I switch back over to the Genesis figure on Puppeteer, now my dot's back. So keep that in mind as we work with Puppeteer. So sitting is going to be, there's a PowerPose helper tool I can use in conjunction with this, and I might actually do that, namely the legs group here. So left click and drag that up. Nope, that's not it. Was it? Yes, I think I was. Let's do this and that. And then we bend the legs down. Maybe like that. And then we bend the toes up, like so. That's already a super fast sitting position. But of course, the figure isn't exactly in the right place. So let's go and look exactly from the left. And so we have two options now. We can either use the Genesis 9 tab here, or we can use the hip bone and translate that. Either will work. Well, now my foot's intersecting with this, so I might have to go and correct that. Either with this or with PowerPose, it doesn't matter. Whatever works. I think on this occasion I'm also going to go and take care of the arms while I'm here with PowerPose, because we had the arms group here. Left click and drag. Oops. The arms group. Dude, where was that? Was that here? That was a torso group, wasn't it? Didn't we have something like the arms group that would just go and bring the arms down? Where was that now? Didn't I just show you that earlier? I've totally forgotten this one here. There. Ah. Perfect. There, so that's that. And then maybe... One other thing there is the hands relax, and this is something, again, I've brought that up earlier. I don't remember where that is in the hierarchy, so I'll head over to the parameters tab with Genesis 9 selected, probably in the pose control somewhere. Let me go and, whoops, let me go and look for relax, hand relax, left and right. Perfect. So this is the one hand, and this is the other. Super relaxed. Okay, so with the figure selected again, you like folded arms, Jeff. Let's take it one step at a time. And then go to Puppeteer, and we'll go and put that point underneath it. So now comes the big reveal. Does it actually work? We go and switch over to preview. My colors change, and I can go and switch to this point here. Left click and drag, and figure sits down. So very cool. So the that's already pretty cool, right? But of course, what if we wanted to do something like Jeff suggested with the, with the arms going like this? Or what happens if we do something perhaps slightly simpler for now? What if we wanted to now give our figure an option to also turn to the left or right? If I were to do that on this layer, it would go and mix in with the up and down motion, and that might not be what we need. So that's why we can use layers. So on the top here, this is a layer that's called layer 1, but we could have multiple. So first we can rename it. Right click here and choose rename layer, and I might call this sitting, and then we know what that is. Let's go and create another one. right click and say add layer. And this one we're going to call twisting as an example, or twist left right maybe. Twist left right. I can see no dots. When I go back to sitting, we still have our dots. So this is how we can add additional motions to our guy. So if I'm going to use the same example as I did before, that we say in edit mode, this is going to be the center. So I'm going to click this one first. So this is going to be a center position to which we can always go back to. And we can now go and once again use PowerPose to just use the twist the upper body, but then also turn the head and also use the eyes and put that all onto these 4 motions. So left, right, and up, down, or maybe just left, right for now. And then we can see how these 2 things can work in tandem. Let's go do that. So with the PowerPose again, and once again with my Genesis 9 selected, that's always important. PowerPose, I can go and left click and drag this over. And perhaps on this occasion, I'll go and move one arm over here. But I'll also go and use the head group, move that over here. Maybe just take this thing away. We've done that, but maybe also the other arm could also do with an adjustment here, I guess. And let's say there's somebody slightly further behind them. Let me go and do this with the eyes. Here, left click and drag, eyes. Perfect. So multiple properties on this movement here. We've got a bit of arm motion, we've got upper body, multiple bones, we've got the head, we've got the eyes, we've got it all. So then with Genesis selected, before we set the dot, this is important. Don't just set the dot now. I've had trouble with that in the past. You go set that and then go and click that here. Ding. So now back in preview, we can go interpolate the whole thing from there to there. But it's now independent from the sitting up and down. So quite exciting. Let's go put it back into edit mode, go the other side so that we have a full motion. Could even go and use up and down while we're there. I'll do the eyes first because I'm kind of here. So eyes go all the way here. So maybe not all the way. Because all the way sometimes does this. That's not a good look. So we're going to just go do this here. Go the other way now. So do the head first, and then we go do the whole upper body group. And now we'll deal with the arms. Oop. That did not work out so well. This is where sometimes it'll be easier to use other posing tools. But there we go. This is nice. So we have that motion in either direction. Once again, scene tool, Genesis 9 selected, Puppeteer, go in edit mode, go do this. In the preview, we can do that. Very, very complex motions, and it's just beautiful to see this, in action so well. It's just nice, because when you're in the heat of the moment of telling your story, it just takes so much time to go into all these dials. So it's really nice to set up a character for a scene into all the positions that they might potentially go, and then go put your renders out. Woohoo, indeed. 1500%, Nate. 1500% is the best look. And then under sitting, we can still go and get the guy to, not sit. I think it also works if you're now standing up again. This is an added bonus here. So this still works. I mean, the arms don't quite, they're not really in situ anymore, but that still works, which is kind of cool. And if you had separate items that are parented to your figure, they'll of course follow. But if you had things like hair that would maybe intersect with the shoulder, you may have to go and select that and then do another puppeteer layer for that. Yeah, so that's, you know, that's something you can do this for all kinds of items in your scene. Even for objects, doesn't have to be characters, could be chairs, could be, you know, all these types of things. Woohoo! You can even go and animate this now, you know, that's also possible. But wait, there's more. Do you know, Lola Lane, Puppeteer is one of those absolute gems. And so again, full disclosure, Daz Studio is my first 3D app that I back in 2006 that I got into. I looked at other apps before, like Maya and whatever I could get my hands on at the time. Like we were talking 2003, 2004. It was difficult. There was no YouTube, and you had to pay for everything or get it kind of, you know, on the black market. And while they were all professional tools, I gotta be brutally honest, I never understood any of them. And Daz Studio is the only thing I understood, and it really opened up my eyes of what you can do with this tool. And then as the years went on and I gained more experience and I found more tools, I keep thinking, why can't this, like insert name X, popular 3D program X here, why can't this thing do it like Daz Studio does? It's a shame. It's a shame. Like Puppeteer is so cool, and you know, it doesn't really, I haven't seen it in other apps. I mean, we should write a plugin for Blender and Maya and Unreal Engine to make that happen. Right, exactly. I mean, the good thing is when we talk about the skeleton, and we're going to do posing from reference figures now, the way I show you how to do this will be translatable into other apps, because we will only rely on the rotational tools of the skeleton. And if you're familiar with Blender, you can go into Blender's pose mode and then adjust the armature of a character like that as well. Like what we're going to do now. Let me go and save this actually, because I'm quite, you know, it's quite cool what we've done here in literally 15 minutes. This is really, really cool. I'm going to go and say this is like the chair Puppeteer demo. I always have trouble spelling Puppeteer. I always have to remind myself, how does that, where's the double P? There's no double T, there's just a double P and a double E. Puppeteer chair demo. There we go. Just one other thing. If you look at the Genesis skeleton, and we can just do it with this figure here, you'll notice, maybe even with the bone editor, you'll notice that Genesis 9 has a couple of additional bones that we should not adjust. This here is the thigh bone, left and right, but you see these little tiny bones inside of them, and they, if you examine them, they don't seem to have any weights attached to them. And I believe we don't really touch them. Daz Studio uses them under the hood to turn the muscular structure of the geometry around it, but we don't have to worry about it. So these are called twist bones here. This is like the left thigh twist 1 and 2, and it's literally just so that the geometry, if we turn this big massive bone here, I think these two bones will be driven by that. I'm not entirely 100% sure about this, but if you adjust them, nothing, the geometry will still adjust itself, but it's really, it doesn't look any good. So like here, the twist bone, if you do this happens. So it's not really something we get involved in, but I suppose it's something like an additional override. They also don't seem to have any limits attached, which makes me wonder, this is probably something that is more to get compatible with other 3D skeletons, or because something is driving it. We've got the same in the arms here. Like this is the upper arm bone here, and then we have the twist bones inside them, and on the lower arm the same thing. So if you're wondering, hey, what is that, don't worry about it. This here, this other thing, that's another thing, just to let you know, this is the right hand anchor bone. This is not something we need to adjust. This is more something that you can use in other 3D applications where you put a socket in the position of a figure. If you want them to hold a coffee cup, for example, then you would attach that to that bone. No limits is the best, yes. Apple IIc, that brings back memories. A whole floppy disk. Do you remember those types of games that came as a stack of 5 or 10? What was it, Microsoft Office that came as like 10 floppy disks? It could be, yes. I haven't quite exactly figured that out because they really only twist. They don't twist in a meaningful way for me. So there's probably something I'm missing here. And just looking at these values here, I haven't dialed those in. These have been provided for me by having used the right thigh bone. So yeah, Daz Studio does something with them under the hood. I just don't know what it is. Okay, let's have a look at posing our figures from reference. There's two approaches to that. You can either pose from 2D images. I might go and create a brand new scene. You can either pose from 2D images, or you can do it from a 3D object. And either will work. The 3D object will usually work much better because you have literally every angle available, whereas the 2D pictures, the perspective might not line up properly, and you're always kind of struggling with that a little bit. But it's good to just get an idea of, hey, what does the figure look like in the picture, and what is my future development, and what does my character look like? So to get you started, there's a couple of things I can recommend you look into, and one of them is, let's go with the 2D image first. This actually contains a little bit of artistic nudity. If you're not okay with that, then please stop watching now. There's this product here that is available for free. Brian's going to go and give you a link to that. This is by 3DSK, and you get it on ArtStation, but you can also get it on their, you get a ton of reference pictures either from ArtStation or from their website, which is actually 3D.sk. This is the second one, which is a 3D scan that's available for free. So you can go and download that and see if you can recreate that pose. And this comes as an OBJ with a texture as well as a ZTL file. And it's a 3D object. So we're going to look at that in a moment. That makes the process a little bit easier. The 2D images here, this is a free pack that they give away, but on their website, 3DSK, as well as, what's it called? Human artist references, you get a ton more, and you can buy them as individual pictures, or you can buy them as a set with the whole person. So I have put them in a little folder here on my desktop, 2D poses, and I think there's more in here. I'm just thinking to keep it simple, I'm going to use this one here, Sava Standing. And this is what the pictures of that pose look like. By the way, if you wanted to have, these thumbnails are a little bit small. If you're in Windows and you want them to be a little bit larger, you can go to the View menu here and then go and turn this from large icons to extra large icons. And then you can see this a little bit better of what these pictures look like. So you get the whole, you get 8, and you get the front 45 degrees, and then the side 45 degrees, and then the back 45 degrees, and then the other side, and then 45 degrees to get you the whole 360-degree experience. Hello, Deviant. How's it going? Top of the morning, sir. And the way we bring these into Daz Studio, because these are not square, I'll show you a couple of tricks of how to do that. So the way we'd work with that is, first of all, I suppose we're going to go back to our Genesis 9 character, and in this case, I'm going to use the basic female shape. So I'm just going to go and bring in the gray figure and turn on the dial. That's the basic female, just so that we have female for female. if you've been working with the Genesis 8 poses, you might actually think, hey, this pose that we're going to make looks oddly familiar, because I think they would have used the same reference pack for the Genesis 8 starter poses. Kind of cool. I like that. And that's under actor, people, base feminine. There we go. Perfect. All right. So if I were to, so the way to work with references inside Daz Studio is just by creating a plane object, primitive, make it a plane, make it Z positive. So I think the default says to Y positive, which means the plane's lying flat on the ground. We want it to stand up, so Z positive works really well for that. And 1 meter by 1 meter is fine. So that would be that. We go and use the texture, that image on the plane. I'm going to go and call this one front. On the surfaces tab under base, I'm going to go and pop a picture in, namely the one which is called front. And if I do that, it works, but of course it's not the right aspect ratio, because my images are rectangular and, you know, not whatever the aspect ratio of this is. So there's a couple of things you can do. One, bring this into Photoshop and make it into a square image. If you want to know how to do that, let me know. I can show you how to do that. It's literally just edit canvas and then bring the canvas dimensions to something square, and then it'll be a square picture. Then when you import it, the aspect ratio is correct. But not everyone has Photoshop, and perhaps there's an easier way to do this directly inside Daz Studio, and indeed there is. We go and right click on the image that we're using, and then we go down here to the properties section and have a look at detail. And that gives us down here the dimensions of the image. So 3744 by 5616. So it's a really large image, quite nice. So we could just use the scale value of our plane object and type something like that in. So I'm going to use 37.44 for X. So that's back here on the front in scale on X. So instead of 100%, I'm going to say, what did I say again? This was 37.44. There we go. So we just type that in here, 37.44. Ding. That makes it a bit slimmer here, right? And then the other one for Y, we're going to use 56.16. 56.16. Ding. There we go. And now, even though it's not big enough, it is now exactly the aspect ratio that came with the... Thank you, Brian. Excellent. Thank you so much. I should have looked at the chat earlier. Yeah, so this is now the exact aspect ratio we need. And now all we need to do is look from the front and put our reference picture into the kind of size that our Genesis figure has. You can even go bring this forward a little bit, or make it transparent. That is also possible. So we do this and then go look from the front. It's a little bit fiddly, but you only have to do this once, because subsequent references should look the same. So now we can not really see our Genesis figure anymore, but on the Surfaces tab, Geometry, cut out opacity, dim that out a little bit, and now we have you know, anything we need. So like, maybe I'll do it like this, so we see this slightly dimmed out. Let's see if we can get the size right. Now the other issue that we're going to find in a moment, let's call it 400 here. I think 399.06, let's call it 400. That's pretty much there. There. The other problem we're going to encounter in a moment is that we have perspective in the reference picture, but not in our orthographic viewport. So let me go do this so I can see both a little bit, but you know, just according to taste. Posing from reference is sometimes easier, not so much if it's done in the same spot, but you can also just go and move your reference picture over, or keep moving, trying to put it literally on top of your Genesis figure, try to pose, and then move it to the side so that you can see, is this roughly there? So I'm going to go and try it from the front first, and then we'll see where we go. I can also move this back, so that's behind my figure. And I'm also going to use the same plane object here, edit, duplicate. I'm going to call this one, it's going to be on my left. Rotate this. So I wish we had snapping enabled, but I didn't enable that. Let's turn it over to 90 degrees. Put it into this place and also slightly further over here, and make sure we load the correct image into it, and then we make fine adjustments to it. So that is under base. So this is now this one here. Aha, excellent. So now if we go from the left, we can see we have a little issue here with the foot. So the picture appears to have been taken not exactly from the side, but from kind of slightly angling down. So, one of those things. Oh, please. You could do that. You could do that. Billboards with transparency files. Yeah, you can do that. That's a possibility. Yeah, there's a lot that you can do. So 2D references, they're always a little bit, I always think these are great to use as, it's also a bit too, it's bigger than our picture or our figure, so it looks like that. The 2D references, I think that is really all they are. They are references. Yeah, like here, I think we need to go a little bit smaller on this. Let's call it 370, because they're really only something that inspires you while you're doing it. You don't have to do it exactly like the reference picture is. It is a good guide, but you don't have to follow it 100%. If you want to make artistic changes there, that's totally fine as well. So almost like the setup is longer than the posing, huh? Okay, there we go. Those are our, I'm going to go and turn the draw settings. I'm going to turn the wireframe off here so that we don't have that in the frame. Okay, now the fun begins, in which we're going to go and work our way through this. Before we do that, I'm going to go and put all the stuff that I have here aside for the Genesis figure into a group. So I'll go and create a group. I just call that, stuff or references or whatever. There we go. And the whole group I'm going to make unselectable. So control click on that little arrow icon. So now I can't accidentally click on the picture in the viewport. All I can go and select is literally Genesis and the parts of Genesis, but nothing behind it. Clever trick there in case you're ever in that position when you've got a character and a set and you want to click the limb of a character and actually you've clicked the chair like 5 meters behind them, and now that moves and you think, oh my god, I wish there was a way to avoid that. It's just make them unselectable. So let me go and make my Genesis figure invisible and just look at the front pose here for a second. So we can see it kind of in here, but I might just do a Google search to illustrate the point. She's putting her weight onto this leg, and this leg is there to support the rest of the body, and that's an important concept in drawing poses, making poses from scratch. You got to have a look at the figure's center of gravity. When we have references like that, it's usually never a problem because there was a real person when that picture was taken, and she would have already adjusted her center of gravity kind of automatically. So she's balancing herself on the foot here, but this here is really the center of gravity. When you do something from scratch, you sometimes make mistakes in which the body would be something like what I said earlier. I say the spine here, if we were to do something like that, this wouldn't really happen in real life, because that couldn't happen in real life. We would quite naturally put our leg out a little bit to balance this off. But often when you just have the freedom of dialing in everything you want, we forget these little things. So there's a small rule of thumb that we can remember, that the center of gravity is somewhere on the torso. It's usually somewhere where the belly button is. Sometimes when we go and move our body over a lot, or we're carrying something rather heavy to one side, then it will shift towards where the weight is. But from that point where you think this is kind of the center of gravity, think of yourself as drawing a line down, literally just down on the ground, and see, is there a support object here? This could either be a leg, or it could be a chair, or it could be a walking cane, or it could be the side of a table against which the character leans, so that the illusion is complete, basically. Yes, restore figure. That is exactly what, because good point here. Edit figure, restore, not 0. It's go for restore figure, and that'll bring the A port back. Okay, let's go and dial in this pose. So the first thing that we said earlier is that we should look at the hip. So I'll go and move my front picture just to the side, just a little bit, just so we can see what's going down here. So her hip is here, as we can see from the tan lines, and it goes down a little bit. So if I were to try to pose the character so that the leg is okay, that I don't touch the hip, but I get the legs and the upper body okay, then I'll have a problem later on, because I didn't start at the hip. We need to really do this hip twist as well here. Very important. I'm going to go and do this just with the rotation dial showing. Actually, I'm going to go do this. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. Is it Y? No, it's the blue one, isn't it? There we go. So I'm going to go and, just looking at the hip, I'm going to go and do this. And this might be weird, because, hey, Jay, what the hell are you doing? Is this, should you be doing that? But if we just look at this section of the body, then this now mirrors that, and that's the hip. And as I said before, since this is a bone, our original gadget here in the viewport hasn't changed. It still is in the, if we were to see the floor, it was still at the floor here. So we'll go and start with that, and now we'll go and work our way down on the body. So from the hip, close stuff down. We'll go and close the spine down. I'll go and use the pelvis now. Look there, I'm very close by the pelvis now. This is now going down. The pelvis now probably kind of corrects that motion out a little bit. Now we use the thigh that is kind of lifted out, and we'll see this better from the other side, how much the leg is lifted, but it probably will be lifted a little bit. Like so, just looking at the upper leg now. Might be a little bit too much, we'll see that in a moment. It's also twisted out. If you look at the knee is looking that way. So that's something we can do here already with that twist motion out a little bit. That might be too much, but we'll see where we go with that. Now we'll go with the next bone down from there. So that's going to be the shin here, and the shin is now going to go so that it touches the floor. In fact, put my floor back on here. Sometimes the difficult bit is finding out which dial is it, man. It's this one here. So we're going back on the floor, and yeah, I can see I've probably overdone it here with the twist a little bit. Because then we need to go and turn the foot. Whoops, turn the foot down, like bend it down, and then from the foot, we've got the metatarsal, that's the top bit of the foot here. That does this, and then we do the toes, and the toes kind of bend a little bit so that they can sit on the floor. So if you were to use the left clicking and dragging the figure now, you would ruin so much on your pose, which is why I don't recommend you do this. No matter how many things you pin on the upper body, you would have ruined so much hard work that you've just put in. So left clicking and dragging on a body part only as an absolute last resort, or as a really, really fast quick fix. Okay, let's go and put this down a bit again. I think that's not bad. If we're touching the floor from the front, yes, there we go. So that's one foot done and one leg done. We haven't done this leg yet, so that's probably the next thing that we want to do. I think this is now, I think there's a little twist involved for the foot to go out a little, and that's probably all that's necessary. I'm still thinking that maybe the pelvis here could have dragged down, bent down a little more. Remember, if this is too fast, this adjustment, just use this, because that's more fine-grained. So yeah, I'm just thinking this leg is probably a little more like that. I think, and that means we have to make another adjustment on the on that foot, but not a lot. We can probably do that here. Oop. Use that little tool and go and just do something like that. Let's call that the upper body done. I mean, you know, you can spend as much or as little time with it as you like, but you know, that's one of those things. Let's do the upper body quickly. And we'll see that she, in fact, has that kind of S-curve going up. So this is now closing down the pelvis again, because now we're going to deal with the spine and going forward. Remember, the spine in Genesis 9 has 4 segments. So spine 1, spine 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to use all of those in conjunction. So spine 1 is the first one. And I think I might go and try to emulate this curve going up there. I don't know if I'm going to be super successful, but I'm going to go and bend this in like so, and the next one up in the hierarchy. Yeah, it's difficult with this, so that's where the fast pose tool comes in. This goes back here, 3 goes back there, and then 4 makes her go and stand up straight like so. In fact, even further up, because if I look at the shoulders here, this shoulder is further up than that. So I think I'm going to make this a little bit more pronounced, perhaps, if I can. So one thing that I didn't like, and I kind of instinctively went back there, is that the spine, the top spine here, is at a limit to get this effect done. And I'm thinking, hey, I don't have the same kind of going down that she has with her shoulders. And that reminded me of something that I said earlier, that if you get towards limits, then that usually means you're not doing something quite right. So I'm thinking I may have made a mistake, miscalculated myself here on the spines here. That's possible. So maybe I'll go and turn this spine to here further. But there's also stuff we can do on the shoulder. So I'm just, you know, making that mental note to myself. So now the shoulders are kind of okay here. And we got the spine. And now let's go and work on this shoulder here, so left shoulder first. That goes down. The shoulder is sometimes also called the clavicle, and we have adjustment options here. So as we bend it, you can see how much the shoulder actually can come up if we do that. So I might just go and do that, compensate a little bit. That means I can go and bring the spine down and move it away from the limits, because it's just going towards limits just means, you know, there's something you're posing isn't quite right somewhere up the pose tree. And then we have that, and this is also then bending kind of forward, I think. And that's actually now the upper arm. Oops. Let's do the lower arm actually. Bend lower arm, and that goes kind of in front of her. So this is where we go back to the upper arm and see if we can make that pose happen. So this kind of goes across her to the front of her body. See if we can make that happen. This comes down, and then this also goes to the front like this. That's what she's doing. And I think now the shoulder can actually come forward a bit. And then we'll deal with the hand later. Put the fingers down, put the head down a little bit. I might actually do that. The head is almost, it's kind of comes down a little and moving to the shoulder a bit. So that's now the neck group. And again, it's tricky to do here, so I prefer to use the posing tool for more accurate controls here. And then this goes forward a bit. Neck 1, neck 2, and head. Those are the things that we have at our disposal. And then, of course, the eye. So the eyes, you probably want to put the eyes down. This is a good one with PowerPose to do. She's kind of looking down, so we go down. Perfect. And while we're here, we can just have a quick go at the hand while we're in PowerPose, and that is this hand here. Yes, perfect. And this is grasp, so fingers together. And then I might just not use the whole hand group. I might just use the little finger and that finger, and then they both go the other way, namely this way. Is it green? Yeah, green, perfect. As you can see, you can spend a ton of time on this. No, green, there we go. Green goes over here. And then that happens to the other fingers as well. This goes less so they're both angled, but then I'll go and take this up. And this up and over as well. And then I think these two bones, if we really want to make it absolutely super accurate, I think they're kind of further down like so. Kind of like that. Okay, one more arm to go, and then we're almost done. I mean, I'm not entirely happy with the leg here, but you know, that's the process. That's the process. Switch back to the scene tab, and we'll go to the right shoulder. Right shoulder probably comes down a tad, and then right upper arm comes down, and twists as well. So if you look at the hand, this hand is kind of facing this way and her hand is facing forward. So a bit of twist action, whoops, like so, and then we're almost there. Thankfully we've already seen that little, whoops, hand helper earlier. So with the hand, I think I'm just gonna look for the relax helper. As demonstrated earlier, and this is her right hand, isn't it? So right hand relax. Boom, perfect, look at that. If you wanted to make another adjustment, go ahead and do that. And we're pretty much there. So now you can go and have a look from other sides. You can see if you wanted to maybe bring in other images as well to look at another side. So if the position of this hand wasn't all that clear, you could go and say this image here, the left one, duplicate that, edit, duplicate, and then move that over here. Also rotate it around by 180, so that makes it 270, and then bring in that other photo that we have called, it's not supposed to be called left 2, that's the left and the other left, so it's called that right, surface. So it's a little fiddly, but if you use it as a guide of what your pose is supposed to look like, there we go, then you know, you can, this is how you can work with 2D reference images. And it's a little different when you're modeling from reference, because that's where you really want to go and right. Thanks, Julia. I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you model something from a character like that, the character is usually in the A pose or T pose, and at that point you would really look at the front and move them into the same position like this, and then with a bit of transparency you would gradually go and put the vertices into place so that you have an outline, and then you do the same from the sides. But when you're posing, that's sometimes not that helpful, so you can just go and move them to the side, and you know. So yes, reference pictures, if you don't want to make them square, use the scale trick that I've shown you here, taking a look at the image dimensions that you have, and then you know, then you go and tweak those aspect ratios to what they need to be, and then you use the overall scale to shrink it down or move it up, and there we go. Eventually you can switch that off and have, yeah, I'm still not happy with the leg, but it's, you know, you get the picture, you get the picture. Well, we're not at the end of it yet, AMZ. We're now having a look at how to do the same thing again, but posing from a 3D reference, and that is somewhat faster. Let me just go and save this off here. Save standing pose demo stream, I'll call it. And I can show you what I've done in preparation for the session, because I think that looked a little bit better. Pose standing. Let me go and merge that into the scene, because I had more time to spend on it, you know. Steak knives. Steak knives. That is what there is more. I'll take the reference groups away, and this is Genesis number 2. This is what I've done in preparation for the stream, so that actually looks a little bit better, but that's the extra 30 minutes that I've spent on it, getting that right. So if you just, you know, keep doing that, and if you spend enough time with it, you get better results. So it's literally like everything in 3D. What you put in the more time you put in and the more you work on the details, the better the result will be. Like the arm here bends much better compared to the reference, and the leg here is much nicer, and also the hip area. I think I modeled that a little bit better in preparation. So him became a shim, yes. So let me show you the other thing that I've done here. This was a promo I've made, but this was the pose we're going to work on now from a 3D reference. I believe I've used something from their website here. If you go to 3D assets, if only I could remember the exact pose I've used. I think, was it this? Clean A-pose scans, I think so. I don't remember. It's a ballerina pose that looks like this. And this again, this is a bit don't worry about the poke through, but this is a bit tricky to come together. But it all starts with something like this, which is the 3D scan that we're going to bring in. So this is a relatively high-res scan. If you look at the wire-shaded mesh, it's not super high-res, but if you had one that's a non-clean scan, then Daz Studio might slow down a little bit. So in those cases, I recommend, if you have that, go decimated a little bit before you bring it in, because it just slows Daz Studio down. It doesn't have to be a scan pose, by the way. It can also be an older character that you want to model from reference. Say you had something from Genesis 1 and you can't find a pose converter or whatever. Just go and bring in that character, make sure it's locked, and then model your new character reference around it. Could even be from a different program. You know, if you find something that that you want to bring in, say from a poser figure, and there is no pose converter, you can just go and export an OBJ, bring it into Daz Studio, and model around that. And the great thing here is that you can literally look at it from all angles, and you can pose on top of the character. Let me show you how to make that happen from scratch. For squishing, the only recommendation I have for squishing things in is to sculpt this thing. So there's really no tool that can make this easier. Lyra's product Squishy Humans is a step in the right direction, but it is a deforce simulation, so it takes a long time to calculate, and it might not have the results that you want. So if you had something like, if somebody's grabbing my arm, for example, there's really no tool that you can employ to make that happen. The only thing is you can bring that into ZBrush or Blender and then literally sculpt those indentations in yourself. That's the only way to do it at this moment in time. Just one more thing, yes. Jay is challenging Columbo. So I'll start again with my Genesis 9 figure. I might also go and bring them into, give them the basic female again. Female, no, that's not it. Even though it should be in here. Whoops. There, I didn't need to do that. It's okay, fine. I'll find it myself. It's under People and base, feminine, not female, feminine. There we go. So that's our figure. These things here, either of the ones I've shown you, they come in as an OBJ file. This is the one that we need. They also come with a texture. We're not going to use that, but you can put it on there. You can even convert it. It's a very fragmented little thing because it comes from a scan. And it also comes with a ZTL file, just in case you're wondering what that is. That's a tool you can load into ZBrush and then draw the figure out and use the geometry directly in ZBrush. So that's also possible. But we only need the OBJ. So I'm going to go to File, Import. And this is in fact the ballet dancer, Anastasia she's called. And there were like 4 or 5 poses. It's often difficult to understand which scale do I need. I'm just going to start with Daz Studio scale, and that is almost kind of there. There she is. This is the base scan. And just so that we can see that a little bit better, I'm going to go and change the material in the surface properties, and I'm going to make it maybe like a pink, slightly darker pink. Doesn't have to be, just so that we can separate it from our gray